The music was getting ready to kick back in again. It always throws me for a loop when it does that. It always like when I switch it over, it's like, nope, we're going back into that song one more time. And I'm like, no, just stop. Stop the song. It's okay. Greetings, everyone. Jared Wade here with Yoko Consulting, Yoko Co, Yoko Co, as some call it. And I am joined today by the wonderful Bree Richmond. Bree, thanks. This is the first time you've been on the show, isn't it?
It is my very first voyage, yes.
Oh my goodness. What are you most excited about? Because I know that you're super excited about something.
I'm excited to geek out over information architecture, which we don't think that is, but I love explaining these types of things to clients in our meetings and stuff like that. So I'm happy to try to break things down to a larger audience and, hopefully give them something that will be useful for, their own websites. So
that's fantastic. Well, everybody that has watched these knows a little bit about me. If you don't mind, feel free, introduce yourself, let them know who you are, what you do here at our wonderful organization, and maybe a glimpse into, how you help those organizations that we get to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Bree Richmond. I am the Director of Strategy at Yoko Co. I live out in the desert, Tucson, Arizona, so representing the Southwest. I've been with Yoko Co for about 3.5 years, but I've been in marketing and website, design for over 25. So I was 4 years old when I got started. Just kidding. But it's I'm very passionate about it. My background is actually a little bit more in biotech and life sciences, but now we're focusing more on nonprofits and associations. And what I do in the project process is really far-reaching. If you want to boil it down, I'm the person that asks a bunch of annoying questions to make sure that we are delivering on what we set out to do. I'm helping to define the problems that we're meaning to solve. Sometimes those aren't what we think we're trying to solve. Sometimes it's something different. And so I have to try to make sure the ship is pointed in the right direction and then we ultimately get where we need to go. So making sure that strategy is present throughout the project. So
that's outstanding. I know that today's conversation, we're going to be focusing a bit heavy on a very robust topic of information architecture, which I know can be as, what is it, Shrek or our donkey from Shrek, the movie Shrek. Like there's layers. There's like layers of an onion that it goes deep, and there's a lot of things that we can go into. So today I'm excited because we get to touch on this really large topic of information architecture, but in our conversations kind of leading up to this live, we're going to kind of break them down and make them digestible and make it a little bit easier to at least have a really good understanding of what information architecture is. But before we get into that, before we jump into that fun world, you have a unique perspective of being on those conversations and those calls with organizations that are kind of figuring out, hey, what are the next steps and how do we continue to move forward? And you had mentioned, hey, you come to me with all of the, interesting and left field questions and things like that. I'm going to put you on the spot. Okay. Are there any questions that like ping out that you're like, ooh, that was a favorite question, or ooh, that was a really cool moment with, you don't have to say the organization, but like, what was the question that you were like, oh, that's going to be fun?
It's really interesting because organizations tend to have similar questions. I think that's one of the interesting things and kind of what the context that we bring into organization into these projects. I'm not saying there haven't been some left field ones. None are popping to mind, but most of the time, the thing is we have all this amazing content, all these amazing things. We put our heart and soul into developing this stuff, and yet people can't find it, So 9 out of 10 times, they're just kind of like, please help me find a way to showcase what we already have so that we can provide member value and get more people to join the organization. So
yeah, and I appreciate that honesty. And it's, if you're watching this live or you're listening to it or you're watching it a month or two down the road, the encouragement that I hear from that is that you're not alone. And the questions that you might think are, oh, this is a this is a silly question, or this is a question that nobody's ever asked before, and this is something I should know or whatnot. It sounds like in conversations with you, as well as conversations with other team members, we all have these questions. They all pop up, and the best thing that you can do for your organization is to just be transparent and say, hey, these are the things that are going on. These are the questions that we've got. So I appreciate the transparency there of saying, hey, we work with a lot of organizations, and a lot of the questions are actually very, very similar. That just shows that, hey, we're all on the same page, so to speak. We're all human. We're all figuring things out.
Yeah,
So
and it
thank you.
speaks to the caliber of organizations too, because you have to listen to your members and maybe even non-members, because again, we do associations more often than not, but and you have to care. So because most of the people we work with care and they come from that background and they listen to their members, you know, that tends to be the thing of like, how do we serve them better? So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's jump into information architecture. I know if you are not familiar with that phrase, it can be a little overwhelming. You get into sometimes, jargon and big words and words that you read on websites and blogs and whatnot can throw you for a loop. I would love if we could just kind of start with breaking down what information architecture is, more in the sense of like, what is that actually doing for website visitors?
yeah, so I think there's probably a few terms that maybe people kind of don't know which is which or think they're interchangeable and they may not be. So first, I just want to clarify a sitemap is really the behind the scene blueprint of what pages are on the site and how they're grouped. So that's one thing. Navigation is something different, and that's basically what users actually click to move through the site. And then information architecture is really the strategy behind how everything is structured. So it's how the content is organized, it's how things are labeled, it's how it's connected to users so they can find what they need quickly. So it's kind of the umbrella over everything, and it should really feel invisible. It should feel very intuitive. We want to make it less frustrating. Really, we want it to be something that's quick and easy to get through. It's the more important of the three, I think, because you can have a good solid sitemap, but you can still struggle with the navigation labels or the pathways, and you can't fix poor information architecture with good navigation. So, it's really how everything on the site is organized and labeled.
Cool. Well, it's a good foundation. It's good to have a good starting point of as we evolve this conversation, where we're going to start from. So thinking about, we work with associations and nonprofits, mission-driven organizations almost exclusively. And there's a lot of times where like that internal organization kind of mimics or starts to parallel with like what the website looks like. So in regards to departments or committees or program areas or things like that, it feels like that might be kind of problematic. And can you go into a little bit of detail about why that could be problematic for individuals that are trying to access and use the website?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think as human beings, in general, we can kind of tend to just apply our frame of mind, our point of view, onto others and kind of think, oh, their experience is like my experience or whatever, right? So it's really hard if you're the person who's putting the content on the site to not think about the way the site is structured in a way that makes the most sense for you or for your department or for the internal team. That's just kind of our, I don't know, our default, right, position of where we go with our minds. But if you really think about who you want to reach, maybe they're coming to your site right now. Maybe it's an aspirational goal to reach different folks. You really have to spend the time to get, into their mindset and live a day in their shoes and think about things like, their information sources, their pain points, their daily life, how they access the website, what are they there to find, what do we want them to come to find. So, we usually walk through the multiple exercises with clients to help define all of that. And usually I can see a light bulb shift moment in most clients' eyes, right? Where it's like, oh, I get it now, and typically we're talking about 5+ audiences. It's not usually just a simple, like one particular audience. We're usually talking to people from a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different stages in their career, a lot of different levels of involvement with the organization, and a lot of different needs for the website. So it's understandingly overwhelming. And sometimes people have a hard time zooming out and looking at the big picture because it feels like so much. That's really core, though, to developing an intuitive information architecture, is designing it for the people that are going to be using the site and not for the internal team. So
that's a really, I mean, it takes effort. It feels like it takes a lot of very specific effort to make that happen. Man, that's a really good answer. And I'm trying to think of like,
well, I was going to say there are ways to do it, because I don't want it to sound like it's this, monumental task that, you know what I mean, is there's ways to do it, at high level effort, medium, low. And some of the things we do is really just talk to members, so that can be as simple as just a conversation. We do formal interviews. You can do web surveys. We also just talk to the internal stakeholders and the staff, so while, the information architecture is not organized for them necessarily, making sure the website's easy to update is really important. And so serving the internal client, as we say, or making sure folks feel comfortable, using the site from a back-end point of view, very important. So just talking to people, trying to understand what they're looking for, what they need, and not just assuming is really important. That at a very high level. Then from there, usually we'll make personas, but really all personas is like jot down a list of, who the person is, what they're looking for, what some of their pain points are, just a little summary of what you've learned from talking with them, right? And try to talk to a variety of folks, that have different needs on your site. And then from there, it's a lot easier to put yourself in their shoes and say, okay, I'm looking for this information. Does it exist on my site right now? If the answer is no, that's a content gap. That's where you might need to make content. And the more you see trends and patterns in the things that people are looking for, you start to understand, what pages are important to represent in the information architecture and what needs to be represented probably first, second, and third. So, it can be as simple as that.
It's like a giant puzzle.
It is.
Like
I enjoy the challenge so much. It's like, trying to
figure out puzzles together. Are you a puzzle person by nature?
I'm a strategy person. Of course I like puzzles. Yes.
How horrible would it be if you're like, no, I hate puzzles. I don't like anything about them.
I love puzzles. True.
Good. Well,
I'm very competitive, so my husband won't play games with me anymore. But.
Oh. Drat. Well, you started talking about like the user, and I think that's a good segue into, focusing, because that's kind of how the website is built, right? So let's say members are landing on the site and they know what they want to find, right? They know, me as Jared knows that if I go to yokoco.com and I'm looking for fill in the blank here, I'm looking for details about accessibility or things of that nature. How does that structure, that information architecture, how does it help them, or how does it get them there fast, or maybe how does it hurt them in the process? Because I think there's two sides of the coin, right? Like it could be really helpful, or it could be really a big hindrance.
Yeah, we have to not only look at users in general, like in buckets, but like what is their intent, right? So one user might have multiple intents depending on what they're looking for or the context. I'd say that most of our association clients, the things that people really want to get to quickly are events, things about training or getting certified, because there's something tangible in it for them. Sometimes directories get a lot of traffic if you're trying to look somebody up or refer someone, and then maybe getting involved, things like that. So pretty active things, like I want to become a member isn't usually the first thing that comes to mind. So you have to lead people on a journey. You kind of have to educate them, and you have to kind of convince them in their journey. And then you have to then make it really easy for them to take actions, right? So I would say the easiest way to make clear pathways to action is define, if you can, like a universal call to action for the entire site. We get decision fatigue and overload very quickly as human beings in this information age where we're constantly inundated with stuff, right? So make it really simple and put that baby in the header, put it in the footer, make it really clear for people what you want them to do. I would say one of the biggest pitfalls people fall into is trying to manage their internal teams and say, and we know it's a tough job. Everybody thinks their thing is the most important thing, right? We all want it on the homepage. We want it in sliders. We want it above the fold. And, it's you've got to have it there, right? So, and also the misnomer that people don't scroll, right? So we have to cram everything into that first little section of the homepage, and that's just not how people consume information. And so, trying to streamline things and think about not overwhelming the users and less is more, I think is really important. Like you said, there have definitely been times we're trying to make things a little bit less transactional, so we'll get into this probably in the next point of like, yes, we're making it easy for you to get to what you want to get to, but also enlightening you to the other things on the site that might be of interest if you're interested in this, right? So whetting their appetite to keep exploring.
Yeah, which I think you're actually right. Like this kind of goes into another big scary word, a word that people might see, taxonomy, and that's one of those words that like it starts with tax, and nobody really likes tax or taxes. So initially, right off the bat, everybody's like, whoa, 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 not a fan of whatever this word means. But I think, let's stay on this course here and talk a little bit more about, how does that work? How do nonprofits, how do associations, how do website, the orgs that these websites are being built for, how does that help? How does that element specifically?
So yeah, taxonomies are amazing. We predominantly build websites in WordPress, and WordPress is really good at structured content and taxonomies. I mean, it's not the only platform where you can use those, but it shines in that particular area. Structured content is really, what we would think of as like a template. So you're taking a group of information that has pretty, similar pieces to it, and you're standardizing it, you're templatizing it, which does a couple things. It makes it a lot easier for people on the back end to upload content, right? It's almost like a form you fill out, and it makes it easier for the users to consume because they get used to meta labels being in a certain way, or the structure being similar. So again, it's less decision fatigue on their part, and it's just they can relax and consume the information, right? So defining what those categories are and that structured content is going to be is really important. Taxonomy is just tags, right? So it's just a game of figuring out what filters are going to make it easiest for the users to be able to get to the thing they want to get to. And how can we use these to like pull in related content? Sometimes we'll do that by creating a topic landing page, for example. So a taxonomy can be applied to multiple types of content and then pulled into a landing page about a certain topic. Or, maybe it is something that, you want to be able to filter by business area, or, sometimes every once in a while we'll do like an audience type, or we'll do for events, like, is this an on-demand online thing, or is it in person? You know what I mean? So they're just ways to, again, automate that process a little more, give the users a little bit more control when it comes to filtering, and allow you to push and pull related information around the site without having to enter it multiple times.
Interesting. Well, I've learned a lot actually so far, just with the clear definitions of what these scary words are to me, and how to navigate them. Do you think that teams that are in the process of rebuilding, or doing a refresh or things like that on their website, do you work with them very, very closely throughout the entire process? Do you lean towards, when you're working with them, that more times than not decisions are being based on a gut instinct or internal opinion versus that external side, like, how are users actually behaving? How are they accessing, your site? I think it's a very delicate question. So I want to be forward with that and say, hey, how they approach that, the results can be very, very different if you only focus on the internal versus the external side. But I'd love to hear from somebody who, works through this process. How do you navigate that, especially with a team that maybe started it with the internal, focus, but then they realized, hey, we've got to shift and we've got to go to the external side. A lot of different questions right there. Hopefully you were able to follow.
I think I understand though. I mean, like I said, it's kind of our, nature as humans to make it about us. You know what I mean? So it's kind of what we did. So when that light bulb goes off and you're like, oh, this isn't about me, it's about my users and I need to make this site for them, then it's like, how do I do that? Right. So after that point, that's usually when folks will engage with us and they'll be like, help, what do I do? Some of it comes down to governance, right? Like determining, okay, who's in the driver's seat on what piece, who's, responsible, accountable, consulted, or informed along the way. A lot of it too is walking people through, like I said, if we do interviews, if we make personas, if we do something called a questions exercise where we literally have our clients step into the shoes of the people that are using the site and think of all the questions they would ask if they're, when they're there, right? So that, like, all of these are validating a little bit along the way. Do you know what I mean? And it's like bringing folks on a journey, right? And then we help people bring the larger team on a journey as well. Testing is really invaluable. We try to do a couple types of testing early in the discovery process, card sorts and tree tests. Those are, besides the interviews, those are so valuable because they're sort of like data points that we can lean back on, right? So if someone else on the team is like, why'd you make this decision? Or I don't understand why the information architecture is like this, or I don't know why this is this way. We can point back to the data from the users themselves and say, this is why, it is informed by the users, right? And so that usually gives people cause for pause and they're like, oh yeah, it's not about me. I forgot. And then with that data, we're able to actually make good, strong, solid changes to make it be more about the users. So it helps to close the gap, right? But also leaning into things like analytics or sometimes heat mapping or things like that. Sometimes folks don't know exactly how to use those tools. Sometimes they're very adept at it. So we use them a lot, so we also can lean into, now, not to say, if your site's not organized very well, certain types of content aren't going to get trafficked because, like they said, people can't find it, right? So we take it with a grain of salt. I'll also say just because something is old doesn't mean it's not valuable. You know what I mean? There are blog posts and articles that still get great traction, 5 or more years after they've been published sometimes. So, you kind of really have to, there's no one size fits all. And you, like I said, have to put yourself in the shoes of the user and really see, what's important to them using these different tools and make your decisions that way. So
I think being human is difficult because, like, human nature is we're kind of selfish people just to begin with. And what we're asking to do is like, hey, you got to stop thinking about yourself and you got to start thinking about the tens of hundreds of maybe millions of people that are visiting your site. And I really love that there is a good solid there's good solid data points that back up, hey, because that question of, hey, why are you doing this? It's not just, well, it's because what Bree likes and it looks really good that way. Like, it always goes back to, we're doing this because this data has shown us that this needs to be here for X, Y, and Z reasons, which I really, really appreciate, because I think we can fall into that trap of, well, this is just what I want. And it's not always what's the best thing for the organization. And sometimes those conversations are not always the easiest thing to have. And when you have a team that's working together on, your organization's new website, I appreciate, our pods and, the leaders of those pods and you and other individuals that have such great insight into explaining, hey, this is the why, and this is the why throughout the entire process. So
Well, and even after it launches, making sure you're still listening to members and asking them again, how's this serving your needs? You know what I mean? Yes, lean into the data, look at GA4, make sure the things that you want to show up and that, you want to be traffic, have good traffic and engagement are doing what we want them to do, but it's going to need to be refined. It's a living thing. It's not a one and done, websites just everything keeps changing, right? And so you just have to keep checking in, so
yeah,
that's really
super duper smart. Well, as we come up to the close, I always like to ask everybody that I get to chat with about, hey, what's an action item? So when we're talking about information architecture, and if there is an individual that, hey, we're getting ready to do some updates to the website, or hey, we're doing a refresh, or we're at the very beginning process, or we're knee deep and we're a little kerfluffled, how do we move forward? What would be that piece of advice? What would be that element that you wish that they kind of walk away with? We have a lot of very big topics, which by the way, if any of these topics are of interest to you, if you're watching and you're like, man, I would like for them to go deeper into this specific thing, comment, let us know, and we'll be happy to get back together. And there are other really smart people on our team that we can pull in as well and have deeper discussions about these different things. But anyway, going back to my question, Bree, what would be that, like, hey, if you walk away with only one thing, here's the thing we want you to walk away with?
Yeah, and this goes back to what you were saying about if people want to learn more, because we're talking about maybe doing something more focused on personas and how we use them for websites. So I would say the top task would be to define your users and really, let's say your top 3 users, and start to kind of flesh them out a little bit, sort of like who they are, what their career level is, the types of things they're looking for, how involved they are in the organization, that type of thing. And try to, make decisions from, their point of view as opposed to your own. And that one thing alone will take you very far.
That's outstanding. Bree, thank you so much. I appreciate you joining me today for a quick chat about stuff that I knew a little bit about, but now I know more about, which I'm very, very grateful for. So thanks for taking time out of your day to jump on here with me.
Totally my pleasure. Anytime.
If anybody is watching this and you feel like, hey, this is overwhelming or this is a lot and I can't handle this myself, feel free to reach out to us, yokoco.com, yokoco.com. We have a wonderful team that can help you out. We can figure out, how to best support you and empower you and give you the resources and the support that you need. So feel free to reach out at any point in time if it's about information architecture or if it's about anything else in regards to accessibility or website refresh or branding or all kinds of different things. Our team is happy to be able to support you. So with that, enjoy your day, Bree. I'm going to open up the windows and get some fresh air, and my family's home. That's why I closed the door, because I saw my son walk by and I was like, I'm going to just close that real quick. But yeah, thank you again, and we'll see everybody next time. Bye.